This is an emergency broadcast transmission. This is not a test. This is an emergency broadcast transmission. This is not a test. Please remain calm.
Welcome to the How to Survive the Narcissist Apocalypse podcast. I am Chad the Impaler, and thank you for showing up this episode. This is actually the third time I'm recording this intro. Yeah, I'm having a great day. Anyway, this episode is pretty special. It's a Q&A with a licensed therapist from California who specializes in narcissistic abuse and divorce. Her name is Shireen Pikar. That part of the show will be coming up very, very soon. Again, a big thanks to Shireen for doing it and everyone for sending in their questions. It's a great show that we have for you today. And besides that, in a couple of weeks or a week and a half, we'll be having on the show a lawyer who specializes in domestic violence. So send in your questions through our website, narcissistapocalypse.com. Through the contact page, you can send us questions, or you can go to our Instagram, which is it's under Narcissistinction. It's on there, and same on Facebook. You can find us there as well. And ask your questions, some legal questions that you might want this person to answer about maybe shared custody or things along those lines. And then the third thing, or is that even a third thing? Maybe it's the second thing. I'm lost. Maybe a few weeks after that, again, I'll be putting something out on the on our Instagram and our Facebook for questions. Also on our Twitter, which is a Narcissistinction as well. If you look on Twitter, in a couple weeks or a few weeks, we will be having a mediator on the show to answer questions. So if you have mediation type questions of, what to look for or anything under that, we'll be having that person on the show. Except this person is kind of special, this mediator, because this mediator is my sister. And so my sister will be coming on the show for her first time. And so she'll be part of this, and hopefully she can come on more than that. Now you're going to get to know my family a little bit, which will be interesting. And besides that, there's a lot of stuff kind of going on behind scenes here. It started off as a book that was a jokey podcast that turned into this type of podcast, which is mind-blowing to me that it's that this is what I'm doing and all the help that's being created and everyone. It's a great little community. We got now a Reddit community where people are talking to each other, but also behind the scenes, I take a lot of emails from people who are barely above water sometimes and need help, and I'm doing my best to help you and make calls and organize and get you to the right people. And it's more and more of my day is being put into that area. So everything is kind of unfolded and grown and been part of that. So the podcast, started as a podcast, and we might be just a podcast that is just part of a bigger thing, and it might be growing into something bigger, as maybe an organization that helps facilitate all these things in the real frontline kind of operation. So I'm going to be talking to a bunch of people of kind of what to do and how to make that unfold and be a better resource than what we already are now. Going forward, because this has been very rewarding to do, and I just want to thank everyone for being part of it and letting me be a part of your lives and trusting me to be a part of your life and taking necessary steps forward to healing and getting your life back on track. And really, from the bottom of my heart, this is been a bigger response than I did not expect this to happen. So for everyone who's been sending me nice emails, honestly, I don't know how I can repay you for all those kind words, but it's been an interesting journey, to say the least. And I just really want to thank everyone who's been listening, who's been supporting the show, and also that supporting the show is supporting everyone else going through this. This is our lives. So it's kind of turned into something special. and everyone, it's not, obviously we're here because of tragic situations, but if we can all help each other get out of it and rise above it, it's something I just know. It's these things. I guess you hear about these things kind of happening, growing in this way. You never think it's going to happen to you, and it's kind of happening. And I just want to thank everyone because it feels really good to be doing this. So now I'm just rambling and talking, and I'm going to get out of my own way, and we're going to get to our interview right now with Shireen, and all the information that Shireen is going to be giving, like about the books that like you might hear her talk about. I will be putting on our Reddit page after the fact, and eventually after the podcast, I'll discuss that again. So now, without further ado, here is the Q&A with Shireen Pikar. And today, everyone, we have a special guest. We have a licensed therapist who specializes in narcissistic abuse and divorce. Her name is Shireen Pikar. Thank you for showing up today.
Thank you, Chad. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
And if anyone wants to reach Shireen, she has a website, talkwithshireen.com, and that is, her name is spelled Shirin. That's talkwithshireen.com. Her Instagram is @lets_talk_divorce, and her Facebook page is facebook.com/talkwithshireen, and that again is Shirin. And once again, thank you for being on the show. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to get into all these fabulous questions.
Yes, and everyone for a while has been asking to get someone with your background on the show, and we both got in touch with each other, and I was thrilled because I didn't have to look around, and we just kind of met that one day. So just for everyone out there, give us a little bit of background about who you are and your practice, and you're also in California, correct?
Yes, I am a licensed MFT, marriage and family therapist. I'm also an online coach, and my private practice is in Los Angeles, California. I have been seeing clients for the past 10 years, licensed for 5. And initially, I began seeing clients, and I was a therapist, and I met my narcissist. We got married. We were together 8 years. And we divorced when my son was about 8 months old. And shortly after that, I learned about narcissistic abuse, because it was so different than the way that I had learned about it in school. I had such a different understanding. And so now my practice is primarily narcissistic abuse clients. I do couples therapy from a Gottman model. And I am also well-versed in RIE educaring, which is about mindful, respectful parenting.
Okay. Thank you. And for anyone out there that doesn't understand what she is, I encourage you to look all that up. I will after the show. So I guess before we begin, we discussed that we would want to maybe define what narcissism is. So if you could, educate us.
Yeah, so narcissism is actually a personality disorder. However, it's a little confusing because we all need some narcissism to be, somebody that could advocate for ourselves. And in order to have sort of high self-esteem and be able to put our needs sometimes before others, we need to have some narcissism. So I'd like to always look at it as like a spectrum. So on the left, if we have the healthy narcissism, again, we have a good self-esteem. We're able to advocate for ourselves. We're motivated. We're ambitious, but we're not doing things at the cost of others. We're confident, again, without needing to bash others or put people down. And we're able to exert our opinions in a respectful way. And then on the other side of the spectrum, where we have the unhealthy, pathological, like DSM criteria of a narcissistic personality disorder, whereas unhealthy narcissism, we have a lack of empathy, we have a lack of accountability and responsibility when we do hurt other people. We're never sorry. We have this intense need for control and power. There's a sense of grandiosity and superiority over other people. We're selfish, if we're on this end of the spectrum. We're vain. We're very concerned with our looks or our outer representation of ourselves. We put on a really good show to make everyone think that we're this amazing, superior person. And we need like constant affirmation and attention and admiration from everyone. And there's this sense of entitlement. A lot of the behaviors under narcissism is like manipulation, it's gaslighting, it's projection. These people tend to be very emotionally cold, and they have, very poor boundaries, and they have disrespect for other people's boundaries. And even in this end in the spectrum, it can be a little difficult because sometimes there's the covert narcissist that has more of like the quiet, shy, reserved, vulnerable at times. They're able to mirror empathy really well. They could be altruistic and actually appear very different than the overt narcissist, which is like sort of an obnoxious, obvious sense of like grandiosity, and they talk all about themselves. They're like the attention whores, These people are very aggressive and they have an extreme need for attention. And the overt are the ones that you're very, you're able to spot them way more than the covert. The covert really shocks people over time because they tend to then get into this dynamic of being able to be a completely different person when the mask drops. So I think it's important to note that these are all, symptoms and behaviors of narcissism, because it's such a word that's thrown out at everyone that's sort of difficult. But I wanted to make sure that everyone understands what a narcissist really looks like, and to note that there's people that are on the spectrum that could be anywhere on that spectrum, from healthy to extremely unhealthy and dangerous.
Okay. And while you were saying that, of the list of questions that people have given us, and I'm not going to give a shout out to anyone who asked these questions just for anonymity's sake. But the first question I'm actually asking because it just popped in my head while you were talking about that, and it's not on our list, and it is something that I get asked actually a lot is, does the narcissist know what they're actually doing, or is this something that they are so naturally ingrained in them that they're just doing it? I know when I've been speaking lately on forum boards with people that have sociopathy, I can't even say it, sociopathy. I know the ones that I've been speaking to are very self-aware. So are you able to, because a lot of people have that question, do they know what they're doing, or is it something they can't control?
So it's interesting because the answer to that is a yes and a no. So they may know what they're doing, but they really don't care. They don't give a shit, right? Essentially, it's just me, this is how I am. But even if you were to show them that, look, you're cold, you're not taking responsibility, they would never admit that. So there's no way to really know, like, do they know? Do they not know? It's really all just a facade anyways, right? And so even if there was some sense of them confirming that they know they're doing something wrong, or they're apologetic for something that they're doing, it's not really even authentic, right? So they've learned that this is the way that they have to be, and it serves them, and they don't care how it affects anyone else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just like, I'm a codependent human being, and I was acting and reacting my whole entire life. I didn't understand kind of what I was doing, and then all of a sudden, when things didn't work for me anymore, like an event happened, that happened like for the fourth time, I finally said, why does this keep on happening? And then when it kept on happening, I wanted to change. which leads me into the next question, the first question from actual people, which is, can a narcissist change, be cured ever, or how?
Wow. So this brought up an interesting thing for me, because it's almost like every single person, the first question they have is basically they want to say, is there hope for this narcissist to be different? And I mean, narcissists aside, as individuals, we really need to be aware, and we need to have insight, and we also have to be accountable to be able to sit with the fact that we've done something wrong, or the way that we're behaving in the world is problematic. But narcissists by nature, they can't do this. And this is, again, speaking to the spectrum. So there's a spectrum, like I said, and if they're on one end of the spectrum, and it's really, really deep and intense and ingrained, and they have zero awareness, then absolutely, there's zero chance of change. But if they're more in the middle, of that spectrum, then there might be a slight chance that things could shift a little bit. But I think essentially what people want is a very different person that's warm, that's human-like, that cares, that has empathy, that is remorseful, and that, essentially their personality will change. But the thing with narcissistic personality disorder is that it's working for them. They don't want to change. And 99% of the time, the personality is very deep embedded. It's deeply embedded in them, and it doesn't change. So most of the time, the answer is no. There is no cure. They don't change. And especially if there's no awareness or insight, it's an absolutely no. And that's a really hard place to be in when you're on the other side of that relationship, to be able to accept that it won't happen. And I want to speak to the rescue fantasy that, often people have when they're in relationship with a narcissist, and because there are glimpses of that ideal behavior that you want to see in them. So at times they will be really vulnerable, and it can feel like you're connected, and the times are really, really good. So I remember that. I remember saying, to someone when I was married, like, it's really, really good when it's good, but when it's bad, it's really, really bad. And so those times that are really, really good are the times that keep us hooked, because it's there. It's almost like a ghost that you want to, grab, but your hands, you can't grasp it, right? And that glimpse won't ever become the entire relationship. So even if there's times that they're being nice and human-like and things are really, really good, it doesn't mean that there's hope for things to be different. Essentially the rest of the 99% of the time that things are bad, right? We can't imagine that just because, how do I say this? We can't expect that just because there are glimpses that could become the entire relationship.
Yeah, I like to compare the relationship to drug addiction. And
exactly.
The first
That's
time,
right.
You're always chasing the high of the first time. And, you hit that peak the first time, and then you dip down, and then you get this high, but it's not as good as the first time, and it keeps on this downward shift. And you're always chasing it, and you're hooked, and eventually you have to quit, and you have to go into rehab.
That's right. And it's so hard, because they again show you what it could be, and that gives you hope, right? And it's really a hard place to be in, when you have to accept that it's not going to be any different, and that you're the only one that needs to create this change. And that's by letting go of your drug, right?
Yeah. So the next question we have, I'm going to ask question 5 before question 3, which is for a lot of people. And I spoke to someone this week. I've been trying to help someone this week get help in the town that they're in. And it turns out when I was calling a lot of places for them, it turns out this person had been contacting them before and actually had gone in twice. And they were having trouble breaking free from their narcissist. They were having, I guess, abused partner or abused woman syndrome, where they'd gone away, come back, gone away, come back. So how does someone break away free for good, in your opinion?
So first, I think it's really important to learn about the cycle of abuse that tends to happen with a narcissist. And what that tends to look like is that, you're in relationship with the narcissist and things are going okay. And then the narcissist has this perceived threat of some sort that's either imagined or it could really be happening. And they lash out. So, for example, they feel like they're losing control. They lash out and then they abuse you in some way. And what you tend to do naturally is defend yourself, right? And when you're defending yourself, the narcissist uses that time to then become the victim. And what we tend to do, which keeps the cycle going, is then we go, oh, yeah, I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. And we take responsibility for what may not even really be ours. And we play into this projection, right? And so what we do is then they feel empowered because we're saying, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Or I could see, because we're empathetic people, right? And so when we play into that, then they feel empowered and they're like, yeah, okay. Then they get bolder. And they feel more entitled because that fed their ego. They feel stronger. And so what tends to happen is then the lows become more intense. And then there's shorter time between, the honeymoon and the blow up, right? And so what's really important for you to know when you're breaking free from this cycle is to become mindful of your part in the cycle and to be aware that it's playing out. So don't engage in that and taking part. Simultaneously, you got to work on strengthening yourself, especially during those modes where they're pressing on your triggers, right? So if your trigger is abandonment, for example, during the time where they feel threatened, they're going to threaten abandoning you, right? And so you have to be mindful of what's happening and not play into that. And so an important piece of breaking free is going no contact so that you don't get sucked into this drug, right? They know your buttons and they know what to do and they'll use them against you. So it's really important to go as little to no contact, especially if you share children. I know that you have to go limited contact, but try to have it be through text or through email. If it's a custody battle, you want to always have things written down. So you never really want to talk about things with a narcissist, especially if you have children that, may end up taking you to court. So it's really important to go no contact so that you can get into your healing, or else it's very easy to get sucked back into the dynamic with them, especially when they're in their mode of hoovering, where they're trying to, get you back. They'll tell you everything you want to hear. They'll be vulnerable. They'll cry. They'll apologize. They'll go to any lengths to get what they want.
So, listening to your answer there, one thing I took out of it was awareness of your own actions. And it's something I take responsibility for in my life, of how I have to be aware of what I'm doing and how I'm acting and reacting to people. And awareness being a very big key to certain things. Are there awareness practices that you give people, or maybe a book that they can read about learning this? Because I think this might be like a key for a lot of people. Once they become aware of what they're doing themselves, it makes them stronger maybe to move out of certain situations.
Yeah, so this is a little bit off topic from narcissistic abuse, but I think a really important book for becoming aware of our stuff is the book called Reinventing Your Life by Dr. Jeffrey Young. And it's actually one of the tools that I use for my clients in therapy, because what it does is it brings our schemas up. And schemas are basically ways that we have developed an understanding of relationships, of people, and he's come up with 16 essential schemas. And what I've noticed is that people with certain schemas tend to attract narcissistic people who score high on the entitlement schema. So the people that score high in, for example, abandonment, subjugation, and self-sacrifice are the people that tend to be the perfect magnet for people who are entitled, who have that schema, which is basically narcissist. And so I highly suggest that book, because what it'll do is it's basically a little therapist in a book is what it is. There's a quiz in there, and it'll bring up your high scores of your high schemas, and then it'll tell you even what to do if you scored high in those certain schemas. And it's a really great adjunct to therapy. But even if you can't afford therapy, it's a really good place to go to that'll bring a lot of awareness of your own schemas up. So I highly suggest that book.
I'm going to buy that book myself right after we get off of this call.
Very good.
So I think we're on question 3, and that is, what are 3 tips you'd give to those recovering from narcissistic abuse after cutting ties?
This is such an important question, and I'm so grateful for this question, because this is really what sets apart the individuals who basically recreate another narcissistic relationship versus the people that really break those patterns. So the way that I break it down is I go into the past, I go into the present, and I deal with the future, right? So again, initially, what you want to do is I highly suggest no contact initially. And if you are having to contact the narcissist still, keep it in writing. Get one of those apps like Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents, and communicate through there. Because again, the narcissist has such a mysterious way of being that it's very easy to get sucked back into that drug if you're still having contact with them. So she says 3 tips for those recovering from narcissistic abuse after cutting ties. So initially, you want to go into the past as part of your healing. Take time to heal, which means that you want to really do a relationship cleanse. I encourage people I actually had a client who would call it a man cleanse. So, you just sort of don't date for a while until you've processed your healing, because then what happens is we take those residual unresolved stuff and we take them into our next relationship. And a lot of times, if we're not doing the healing that's necessary after a relationship with a narcissist, again, we will attract another one. So what you want to do during this time is to become aware of your past, and look into your childhood and your parents and your upbringing, and really reflect on what in my childhood set me up for this kind of relationship. And become aware of the traits of the narcissist that you're dealing with. So if you had a narcissist who really lacked empathy, think about who in your life from the past was someone who really lacked empathy. Was it your mother? Was it your father? And process that and think about that and become aware of how this person was just basically a continuation of someone from your past. So another part of the past healing is to reflect on the question of, how was I a magnet for this person, for the narcissist? Did I have trouble with boundaries? A lot of times people with the self-sacrifice and subjugation schemas, they tend to put aside their needs out of fear, of retaliation, or, we have issues with assertiveness. So reflect on, your boundaries. Reflect on your self-love and acceptance and your level of confidence. Because a lot of times when we're in a relationship with a narcissist, we probably didn't have the best sense of self and relationship with ourselves. We probably didn't love ourselves very much. And so we got into a relationship with someone that also not only didn't really love us and see us in the best light, but they also tend to take any self-love and self-esteem you have and trample on it, because that gives them that feeling of power and superiority. So you really want to work on things like boundaries, your self-love, fear. A lot of times when we have a fear of being alone or being single, we'll settle for someone like a narcissist. And the idea of the rescue fantasy, work on that. Because what that tells me a lot of times is that we had to be in an early role of being a caregiver, or we had parents maybe that needed us to rescue them. Maybe they were unavailable or inconsistent, or maybe they were narcissists. So that's a big part of healing the past. Now as we go into the present, this is all part of healing still. It's a lot. The present will have a lot of emotional ups and downs. So normally a lot of the symptoms of narcissistic abuse, we tend to have self-doubt, confusion. We feel helpless and hopeless. A lot of anxiety and symptoms of depression, shame. We're probably emotionally exhausted, emotionally and mentally exhausted. There's a lack of joy in our lives. We're really struggling with depression and anxiety. And so having a gratitude practice is huge. It saved me. I was having a really hard time. I was trying to raise a baby. It was very difficult to focus on the good. And so when you bring in gratitude, a gratitude practice, it's just life-changing, because you're able to then shift into what's going right and what's going well, and shift out of that emptiness and become aware of what's good in your life. Because I know that there is something good, at least something good in your life every day, but we just have to bring that into our awareness. Another piece of the present, healing in the present, is getting back into your body and into your intuition through meditation. Being with a narcissist is going to require you to cut off parts of yourself. We have to split off parts of ourselves to be able to continue in this kind of relationship. And we're often in fight or flight because we're having to deal with conflict and really crazy behavior. And so it's so important to get back into the parasympathetic, which is like the rest and restore mode of our bodies, and to get back into reality and move out of numbing ourselves into more awareness. It's a big piece of what's going to help for the future as well, because we're getting in tune again with our intuition, and that's going to save you, because then you'll be attuned to the red flags of the future. So again, being present in the moment could be meditation. It could be getting into your body through exercise, through stretching, through dancing. That's basically the present, and self-care is also a big part of the present. Finding something, even something really small that brings joy into your life. Lunch with someone that is a support. Eating healthy, drinking a lot of water, lighting a candle that smells really good. Just bringing the little things back into your life that bring you some joy. And then the last piece is the future. So a big part of the future is becoming aware of the red flags of narcissistic people. And because a lot of the times we saw red flags, we just wanted to ignore them because of some goal that we had for this relationship. So I recommend the book, Should I Stay or Should I Go? Surviving a Relationship with a Narcissist by Dr. Ramani Durvasula. And she'll go through some of the red flags, but, real quick. So people that move too fast. In women, a lot of times it shows up as hypersexual. People that are very grandiose and entitled. People that are manipulative, that make excuses for their behavior. Really angry, rageful people. hypersensitive or jealous people, controlling people, people that are emotionally cold, people that are inconsistent and unpredictable. You know, a lot of these things are visible early on. We just have to be attuned to our intuition and be present with these people to really reflect on what they're showing rather than if they like us, if we're good enough. You know, a lot of times people will reflect on like themselves. They'll be focused on if they're enough versus do I even like this person? So this is all a big part of the healing. So
while you were discussing the past, the present, and the future, there was one part when you were talking about the present, which had to do with your body and, you know, your body holds certain secrets about you, and to kind of be in the moment. And for me, in part of my healing process, because I've been in a relationship with one, and I also come from one, and before I people don't know this, but I actually got my coaching certification from a place in San Francisco called New Ventures West. And before I graduated, after my exam, they still wanted me to do one thing, because they could tell that I was getting flustered in my exam, because it was like a live thing. I had to do an actual, session with someone in front of like 3 instructors. And in the process, they could tell that when things weren't working in my mind the way it was, that my brain was gone and that I was completely out of the room. So they didn't let me graduate at the time. That I had to continue on, and I had to go do some somatic work and to figure out what was going on. And one of those things that we figured out was, and I don't know if I told the story on this podcast before, but I was sitting in a room with a somatic coach, and we were kind of discussing things that were going on in the room, and she asked me to be relaxed. And eventually I kind of said, I took like deep breaths, and I said, after a little bit, okay, I'm relaxed. And then we were about to start, and then I don't know what came on in my head, but I just said, do you know what? I'm not relaxed. And she asked me to explain it. And what happened was there was something that was going on with the tilt of my head and the way my head was turned. And I started just saying, like, my whole entire life I've been told to look a certain way and be a certain way. And I've been sucking in my stomach for like 30 something years. And
wow.
And it took until that moment. She goes, okay, so what would relax be to you? I go, to me, being relaxed is being as fat as I can be. And she goes, be as fat as you can be. And I let myself, just be fat. Just let my stomach go over the edge of my pants and like not care. And the breath that I had in that moment was the first time I ever breathed peacefully since I was probably, because I had like eating disorders in my whole life. And it was the first time I was able to breathe. And it was the first time I understood what being present was, because I was always thinking using my brain, and I wasn't letting my body be part of the equation. And that got me to a point where I stopped thinking I could get myself back into normalcy and not outthink myself anymore. Yeah. So
that's the key. I think you hit the nail on the head too with that, because being raised in a family with someone who's narcissistic or parents that are, it really puts you on edge and you can't breathe. You have to be on alert at all times to protect yourself, essentially.
Yes. So thank you for that
get
one.
Into your breath. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's huge.
So next we have question 4, which is, what are the best ways to co-parent to raise a successful, healthy child?
I love this question too, because that just speaks, volumes. You know, we all want to have a child that's successful, healthy, and happy. And oftentimes, I think I have many clients that feel like, well, it's ruined. Like, this isn't possible anymore because my ex is a narcissist. And I say to that, first of all, we have a lot more power than we think we have. Even having one healthy adult in your life is enough. So I want to first say, you're enough. As a parent, you are enough. So then we'll shift into the other piece of it. But basically, I don't view it as co-parenting with the narcissist. My view of it is that it's more parallel parenting, which is that you're doing your thing with your child, and when your child is with your ex, they're doing their thing. There isn't much overlap because narcissists like to take the child essentially out of this world and take them into their world. It's almost like out of sight, out of mind. So I'd say that continue to maintain your connection. And it's your right to speak with your child on the phone or to FaceTime when they're with the other parent. But as far as co-parenting, I would show that you're putting effort in that. But I wouldn't really call it co-parenting because narcissists don't know how to co-parent and they don't want to co-parent. So that purpose of that is to really take the expectation out of this idea that you can change your narcissist ex into co-parenting with you. Now, there are tips and ways to help, to have a better relationship as parents, and to raise a healthy, happy child. And some of those tips that I could give you now, the first one is to work with the narcissist in their narcissism. So work with it, not against it, because you can't really change the narcissist. So one of the best little tips that I've heard, and I love it, and I've tried it myself, and it works wonderfully, is compliment, confront, and then compliment again. Because, again, when you're working with the narcissist, you're working with their need for admiration, and the best way is a compliment, right? They love compliments. So practice with that one, especially if there's something the narcissist is doing that you don't like. You preface it with a compliment. Again, you confront and you give your complaint, and then you end it with a compliment again. Don't tell the child that their parent's a narcissist. That is a very bad idea. You never want to call anyone a narcissist. It's just not going to go well. So keeping in mind that the way that a narcissist deals with their child and relates with their child is one of the view. It's basically the view that the child is an extension of the narcissist. They feel like the children are objects. So they're not viewed as their own being with, needs and feelings and desires of their own. It's very much like what you do needs to be good because it's a reflection of me. And they have a lot of unfair ways that they deal and relate with the child. But your job as the other healthy parent is to then counteract that by being a very loving, empathic, calm parent. Those things are really important. So you want to be non-reactive. You want to model healthy behavior. So speak really calmly when you're speaking with the other parent. Don't fight and confront and everything in front of the child. You want to ignore their threats and don't engage with them in their conflict, because what happens is they want that. The narcissist loves your reaction. It feeds their ego. The worst thing you can do for a narcissist to them is to ignore them. And honestly, that's the best thing for your child, to ignore the threats and don't engage. But if you have to defend yourself, you do it in writing, right? And don't tolerate the abuse, but don't be abusive either, right? And for the child, you're also modeling a lot of these behaviors so that they can also learn how to stand up for themselves. You model the boundary setting, and you take the traits of the parent that, essentially if it's a a narcissistic parent that is super critical, you will talk about that trait with the child and explain how it makes people feel and validate, the child's feelings if they've been that way, right, towards the child. So you really want to hold the space for the child to have their feelings and to validate that, because probably more often than not, the narcissist is not validating emotions at all. It's like, don't deal with emotions with me. So you want to be that container that's a safe space for the child to have whatever emotions they have about whatever is happening with their narcissistic parent. And another important one that we would do with children anyway is to teach them emergency protocol, right? So if someone is hurting you, someone is hitting you, someone is doing something abusive towards you, what can you do? What's a safe place you can go to? Who can you call? Right? So you want to prepare them for these things so that they feel empowered if something does happen when they're with the narcissistic parent.
So you would prepare them, not say that it is the other parent that we're preparing for, just prepare them for life in general in that way. So,
Exactly.
so then they know they have a list of people that they can trust and talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly. Absolutely right.
And as far continue.
Yeah. I was going to say I have links in my website under my resources. It's something called the Wholehearted Parenting Manifesto. And that is Brene Brown's manifesto that she's written up. And it's exactly as what I would recommend for parents to use, whether or not it's a narcissistic situation, but even more. Because there's so many parts of that, essentially all of it, that the narcissist isn't doing. They're not a parent that's embracing imperfections or modeling self-compassion or being vulnerable or being authentic or setting boundaries, or, you know what I mean? There's so many pieces of that manifesto I've framed it, and put it up because it's such a beautiful reminder of the kind of parents we all want to be, especially if we're dealing with a narcissistic ex that's also parenting our child, right?
Yeah, and as far as the parent goes, who is dealing with the narcissist, if they're heavily triggered by certain things and are not good at talking or interacting after, is there a book like a nonviolent communication type book or a conversation book where it gives them help with certain situations and people like this so they can learn the language?
Actually, yes. Tina Swithin has a book. She has a couple books, but the one that it would be in regards to what we're talking about with communication and also understanding what the narcissist is saying. It's called, I believe, Decoding the Narcissist by Tina Swithin. And what she does is essentially say what her ex would say and decode that so that you understand what that really means. And it really helps break it down, and it helps you detach and not personalize what the narcissists tend to say, because they all say the same thing. They're not very creative people. I've very well versed with the same sorts of things that they say and the same sorts of ways that they want to trigger you. And so she breaks it down really beautifully in that book.
All right, and now we go on to, I'm going to skip question 8, even though I love question 8 for right now, just because the next question on the list, I think if you have children with a narcissist, how do you protect yourself from abuse to maintain a relationship? How do you stop that person from continuing the abuse? And I guess this is a court question, and convince a court that they are manipulating the children. So I guess it's more of how do you maintain a relationship if you're still being abused when co-parenting?
So this is really important because you should not accept abuse at all. You set boundaries, you maintain your court order, and then you document. You have everything in writing. You don't create a situation where you can be abused verbally, because you're not speaking with the narcissist on the phone or in person. Even if you're exchanging your child, it's very much sending messages. I highly encourage parents to use those apps so that it's well documented. They can't deny that was them. or if it's a text message situation, don't save their number in your phone so the number shows up in your messages. And so you'll have it documented, and then you can take it to court if they're still being abusive towards you or, harassing you in some way. You have it in writing. But it's important, too, that even if you are fighting with them in court about this, that you state the facts. You don't get emotional. You calmly present the facts. You remember that essentially it's not about you. It's just their personality and their mental health issue, and it's a representation of them. But you still need to be assertive and strong because they're often aggressive. You don't give up, you don't be passive, but you also don't need to be aggressive. You just be assertive, you keep moving, you keep presenting your info and the documents that you have, and hopefully you have enough in writing that, you could make a change in your divorce judgment.
And now we have question 8. This is my favorite question because this is a difficult question for a lot of parents out there. How do you let go of an adult narcissist child? So
this one actually made me so sad, because I can't imagine having to let go of a child as a parent. It must be incredibly painful for, the person who wrote this question. So just wanted to send my love to this one because a lot of times, too, what we tend to do, even as a culture, is that we blame the parents because, it's the parenting or, we blame them. And a lot of times it's really not your fault. Our culture has been creating narcissists, essentially. It's also a choice if your child wants to continue being a narcissist. So I don't want you to blame yourself. We can only do the best we can with, the info we have. But I'd say that it's really important to grieve the child you wanted and don't have. So it's very much a grieving process for the parents, but also setting good, solid boundaries and maintaining a relationship if you feel that in a way that works for you. So if it's sending them a card for their birthday because that makes you feel good, do that. You don't have to fully let go if that, is too painful for you. But be mindful of your boundaries because that's really important with children. I think they can really press our buttons and we feel guilty. It plays on, our guilt. So set your boundaries and have the kind of relationship that you want to have, even from afar, and grieve. Go through those stages of denial, bargaining, depression, anger, and acceptance, and not even in that order, whatever order it comes in.
Yeah, it's a tough one. My family is, my mom and my dad still are currently speaking to my brother. I'm not currently speaking to my brother at the moment. But I know my mom, she's a mom. And she would never, no matter what my brother has done or is doing, she's locked in. She's not. She's never going to let him go. Even though it might be sometimes the healthiest thing for both of them. For that to happen. That's what I've been trying to explain to her. I think right now it's probably the best thing for you to split up for at least a time being, so you can relax a little and figure out your life, and this person can be on their own and discover things. You're too locked in together sometimes, I find, and it might be healthier. Is it healthier sometimes for both of them?
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, it depends again on the level of awareness, because a lot of times there's a narcissistic child that's really, really on the end of the spectrum, and there isn't much that can be said or done. And as a parent, it's very difficult to watch that and to not feel guilty, but also have to simultaneously protect yourself. So it's a really tough place to be in.
I will tell my mom that answer. So we have a bunch of questions here that look like they repeat here. So let me just get to where is it here? I guess question 16. How do you find the right therapist?
Yeah, so this one's such a tough one, and I think it's just as hard finding an attorney too, right? There's a lot of times everyone says that they have experience in a certain field, and we don't really know. And narcissists are very good at what this question said, which is swooning therapists and aligning with them and manipulating them because they appear so different than what's, being presented, right, from this narcissistic abuse victim. So I would recommend asking, and this is sort of the way that I would test a therapist or an attorney even, but I would ask them about what resources they recommend and ask what the symptoms of narcissistic abuse are. Like, how do you know if your partner is a narcissist or not? So first educate yourself and then test their knowledge. And I would also want to find someone, especially in this case, of someone who's mindful and well-versed in parental alienation, because that's a big piece of what narcissists tend to do. And if this person already has a therapist that's court-ordered, I would be very mindful of parental alienation because it seems like there's some things going on, and the fact that this ex is able to swoon the therapist and now it seems like the kid's therapist, I would, go the extra mile and have professionals that I would be consulting with through either, like, for example, there's a book that Dr. Warshak, who does parental alienation, he wrote the book, and he's accessible. You can email him and he'll give you referrals for therapists who he's worked with, and he knows them and refers them personally. So be open, educate yourself, reach out to people. With regards to parental alienation too, I have a link on my website called Family Access, and what they do is they have talks once a month, and you can listen in, and they have professionals who can educate you about, the process. And you can even reach out to those professionals and ask them for referrals for attorneys or therapists. So really educate yourself, but also feel free to reach out to people who are in the field and ask them for referrals, like personal referrals. Because it's unfortunate, but a lot of people don't really understand narcissistic abuse unless they've been there or they're very well versed and they've dealt with cases. Because essentially we don't really learn this in depth, and there's almost like a movement of it now where people are becoming more aware of it, and they don't teach you this in school. And you have to be really aware of who's really the narcissist, because they're very good at projecting it onto the victim. So I appreciate this question a lot. Very important.
And this might be our last question. I'm still trying to go through some of them. This one kind of encapsulates a couple questions, I think, but it's from an actual adult instead of someone speaking on behalf of their children, which is, how do I deal with a narcissistic father who emotionally manipulates you and stops you from any productive or dynamic step in your studies or career? How can I deal with them without arguing or without fighting or without hurting him and making him understand what is important for me? And I guess this also would be grouped with the other questions about, like, I guess when you're younger, the tools that you give to a younger child to know what to do. Yeah.
So this question sort of took me back a little bit to that question of wanting to change him too, because it sounds like she or he wants to teach essentially the parent and have him make him understand what I want is important for me. And that's really hard. I'd be mindful of that and understand that maybe you're in a situation where he can't understand, he doesn't care to understand. But I'd also be aware, and I want to be curious, actually I am curious, of how he stops this person from doing what's productive or taking this step in their careers or their study. How can you empower yourself so that you don't need this, your father's acceptance or their support, and how can you create like a shield against their fighting, the fighting or the emotional manipulation, so that you're not buying into it. And essentially this is also boundaries at its finest, in saying, Dad, if you speak with me, if you speak with me this way or say this to me, I'm going to do this. So your first time may be, Dad, if you are mean to me or are critical of me, I'm not going to talk to you for a week. And then the second step may be, Dad, I won't talk to you for 2 weeks. And then the third time may be, Dad, I'm really going to have to rethink this relationship and maybe sever our relationship for a while because what you're doing is hurtful. And so those boundaries, there needs to be consequences. That's what boundaries mean. It can't just be me complaining over and over and telling you what I need. There needs to be a consequence for the person's behavior. And you need to really empower yourself to be able to support yourself and maybe not need to explain and have someone understand why something is important for you.
And I guess the question before that, so that's the adult. For the child, one of the questions is very interested how to raise my children with a narcissistic father. How do I teach them to stand up for themselves and not internalize what they're thinking or feeling?
Yeah. So again, the first step to me is to acknowledge the child's feelings and really validate. Because most likely the narcissistic father is not doing that at all. So you really want to have a safe space for the child to, come home and, first of all, detox from that time that they've been with the other parent. So, have a really calm, relaxed sort of comeback into your home without a lot of stimulation, and let them unwind and have the child be able to just relax a little bit at home. And then over time, after you've given them that 24-hour period to get back into the zone and readjust to being with you, you can bring up the characteristics of the father that is problematic, that's narcissistic, but not directly the father. So if the father, let's say again, is maybe critical. Critical is a good one because a lot of times narcissists are critical. If the father is being critical of the child, you want to find others that you can think of that exhibit that behavior. And then you start using that behavior for learning. So you say, when this person on TV says something so mean to that other person on TV, whoever's in the show, that must be really hurtful. I don't like that. That's really unhealthy to be speaking to people that way. It must really hurt their feelings. Depending on the age of the child, you can go more in depth about how that's not okay and teach them other ways. Again, use this time for learning, this behavior for learning, so that you're gently guiding your child to learn how to decipher what's healthy and what's not without directly saying, hey, your dad's a selfish, a-hole, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to raise your child with that ability to decipher and learn things on their own, but also model. It's so important for children to see and have a model of someone who stands up for themselves, whether or not it's with the narcissist or someone else. And everyone's smart, educated, no matter, I was a therapist and I fell for narcissists. So it's they're very good at what they do. Mm-hmm. So I don't want this person to, blame themselves. It's just the way that they are. And we have to learn and reprogram ourselves to not be a magnet to that kind of person. And through your healing, you're raising your child in a way that won't be, attracted to another narcissist, because you're modeling what's healthy and what feels good authentically to your child.
And we have maybe two more questions or one more question.
Sure.
This one, I think, more be a little bit straightforward. If you have children with a narcissist, is staying together and modeling firm boundary setting a better option for the children than, I guess, getting a divorce or not marrying co-parent or just regular co-parenting with a narcissist?
This one was such a tough one for me, because I think that when, you're with a narcissist, it's almost like it's miserable, it's horrible. And then you divorce one and it's difficult in other ways. So with every choice, you gain something, but you lose something else. And so, yes, maybe this person will continue to be with their children and they can be making parenting decisions together jointly. But then you'll be losing a model of a healthy relationship potentially for your child. Maybe you'll be depressed and unhappy. Usually if we're with narcissistic people, we tend to have symptoms of depression and anxiety and confusion, hopelessness, and we feel unsettled. We feel shameful. We feel exhausted. There very much is those symptoms that come with being with a narcissistic person. So I know she or he says that the person that they're with is a narcissist, although they're not mean or spiteful. They just refuse to acknowledge a reality in which he could be at fault or responsible for the consequences of his choices. So that's a tough one, because the thought that comes to my mind is, well, maybe this person is just critical. I don't know. It's hard to tell. Not critical, I'm sorry. It's just defensive. The narcissist that she's claiming is just defensive. So I can't speak to that very much, but if you are with the narcissist, most likely you're having a lot of symptoms that aren't the best for your relationship, and probably you're not being your best self. And so that's going to be a loss. Yes, you may share your time again with your child and, with your spouse, and you don't have to deal with other things that come with divorce, but it's a give and take, right? I'd encourage this person to be mindful of themselves, and if they're coming off as criticism, sometimes that creates defensiveness with the other person. So practice, again, the compliment, confront, compliment thing, but also be mindful of, I'm just kind of skeptical. I don't know if this person is really with a narcissist or not. But yeah, it's a tough call to make, and it's a personal choice. So, yeah.
Well, I think questions 11 through 13 are redundant, would you say?
I have numbered them a little bit differently.
Okay.
But let me pull them up real quick.
There's one about money.
Oh, yeah, the one about money. I actually want to concur about the one, but do you want to ask the question?
Okay, so we got the question. It is, I recently got out of a relationship with a narcissist in the beginning of February 2019, to be exact. Unfortunately, I loaned this individual money, and while I have made a lot of progress in terms of recovery from everything else that I went through with him, the money is the one thing that I still think about on a daily basis. Everyone that I have spoken to, including a psychotherapist that specializes in narcissistic abuse, advised me that I need to forget about the money and move on. I would really appreciate if you could ask if there are any tactics, methods, or situations where people have gotten their money back from a narcissist, or if it's a complete waste of time and energy.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with let go and cut your losses, because I think this person has invested already enough time and energy, and it seems like they've already gone through a lot of progress in their healing and recovery. And so my concern would be that if you're getting back into any kind of relationship or any kind of communication with this person that's a narcissist, I would be worried that that would set you back. And it would take you possibly back in your healing. It might suck you back into that, narcissistic hole. And so I also would want to spend a little bit of time with you. If I were talking to you as a client, I would want to know what the money represents. Because it sounds like the money maybe means something to you besides just what it is. Maybe it's fairness, maybe it's justice, maybe it's feeling vindicated. I don't know. Maybe it's feeling like at least you got something back after losing so much with the narcissist. So I'd really want to be attentive to what else this could be rather than just money. But if you feel like it's really just about the money, I would let go and cut my losses.
Yeah, in my experience, when there was one little tiny money issue, in my mind, going back and thinking about it right now, it would be, I'm trying to place myself, I know exactly where I was. It would more be like, I want this person to have some sort of consequence.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And this is what it is. And someone has to see this besides me. And eventually I took the idea of the movie. You ever see the movie The Bronx Tale?
No.
A Bronx Tale. A long time ago. It was with Chaz Palminteri and Robert De Niro. And it's this young guy, and he starts working for the mob. And this guy owes him like $100. And he starts chasing him. And the mobster comes up to him one day and goes, "Why are you chasing that guy?" And he goes, "He owes me $100. And he says to him, "Just look at it this way. You paid $100 and you never have to see this person for the rest of your life."
Exactly. And it's any amount of money is honestly worth not having to see
that person
or
for
deal
the rest.
with them.
And that's how I feel. I'm like,
Totally.
It was just it was in his mind. This was nothing for all the headaches that you've just got rid of.
Exactly. And the next time around, if you get sucked in, is most likely going to be way worse than the first time because they're going to make you pay for what you did.
Yeah.
If you left them or if you slighted them in any way, you're going to pay the second time around. Don't think you got off so easily, right?
Exactly. Next time, just going to be, it's just going to save you so many headaches.
Yes.
So, of these other two, should we pick one of these?
I think I recently got out of an emotionally abusive relationship 2 months ago. Do you want to talk about that one?
I just recently got out of an emotionally abusive relationship 2 months ago. I recently, a few weeks ago, found out he already met someone new and married them. I feel like healing again from scratch. And not only do I feel so broken, but I'm a smart girl and I hate myself for being so blind to the signs. What can I do to heal?
Well, this is very, very typical narcissistic abuse behavior, right? They discard and they're all about what they can get out of you. And when they think that there's nothing else left that you can give them, they're done and they discard you, right? And things often don't end in a pleasant way with them. It's hard to process this discard in like a humane way because you spent years and years with this person and then they're just done. Or it's almost like just done. And that's really painful. Of course, it's going to feel like, complete nightmare to have to deal with. And then you find out that he's found someone else and married them. And that's very painful. So it's absolutely going to feel like you're healing from scratch again. But I want you to know that the relationship was really never about you. And although that hurts, I want you to validate your pain and honor your pain. It sounds like you're judging your pain a little bit and you're judging the fact that you were, quote, blind to the signs. But it's really important to be compassionate and validate yourself, almost like talk to yourself like you would a child and say, look, I really understand why you really wanted this to work out. And it's okay that you missed the signs. You won't miss them next time. And just be really empathic with yourself. Because this is very much a narcissist move This is why they don't care to listen to people's, grievances when they're in a relationship with them. They don't take responsibility. They don't want to work towards resolutions. They don't want to amend their behavior. They just really want you to stay asleep and feed their ego. And when you say that they're doing something wrong or that you're being hurt by them, they don't like that. They don't want you to assert your needs. They don't want you to have boundaries or rights. They just want you to keep going and doing what they want and feeding their ego. And so when you stop doing that, they discard you, and then they move on to someone else who probably doesn't know what they're doing because they're very much in their charm mode and they want to hook this person. And they're on their best behavior, but know that they'll probably do this again and again and again because this is just how they roll. So take out that judgment piece of yourself, practice compassionate understanding, and validate your pain. And I'm sorry about that.
And I think we have one more question. It's a long question. Well, it's a short question, but it's a long, background. Do you want to do that one?
Mm-hmm.
It's again also kind of narcissist ever change. Question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so can a narcissist ever change is the question, and then the background is it worth sticking around in hopes we will be better? In my case, he volunteered to seek help and start therapy. He did first few sessions, and he feels it's helping him out, but recently stopped because the insurance is no longer covering it 100%. He was going to deal with his insecurities, and because he knew the way he talked to me during arguments was unkind and manipulative. I recently found him sexting another woman. He doesn't seem remorseful, even though he has apologized and says he wants to work on our marriage. Yet he continues to say what he did isn't so bad. He isn't willing to have me look at his phone or to compromise in other areas of our marriage that I feel need changing. Thank you for your help.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, authentic remorse, unfortunately, doesn't happen with narcissists. There's almost always a self-serving agenda. And when they volunteer for therapy, I'm almost like a little skeptical because they really only do things that are self-serving. And so when he says he wants to work on the marriage, but there isn't action, what I take away from that is that narcissists very much have their feelings and their opinions and their desires are very fleeting, and their choices are very fleeting. And so when he says that he's wanting to change and he's going to work on things, but then you don't see any follow through, I really wouldn't expect much change to happen, unfortunately. If you want to stay in this marriage, I encourage you to work on your expectations. Expect that he maybe won't be remorseful. He won't be reasonable. He won't be compromising in the ways that you would envision your partner, that you'd expect your partner to be in a healthy marriage. And so having a partner, A, that's not willing to go to therapy, not be authentic, not take steps towards regaining your trust, it's really hard to have a healthy relationship. And that change that you want to see, I feel like what tends to happen is we expect that change and we want it, but then it's very fleeting. He'll promise you the change, but the next moment he'll take it back, So, for example, with my ex, one day he was sitting on the couch telling me he wants to work on things, and literally a week later he was gone and it was done. So it's like you can't really rely on what they're saying to be truth, especially when the actions don't line up and it's inconsistent. So I'm sorry, again, that you're going through that, but, it's unfortunate, but I encourage you to get your own therapy to learn how to manage your expectations if you want to stay in the relationship with him.
And I think that's all of the questions. There was another one. Would you suggest a toolkit to help the survivor begin the deprogramming from the narcissistic abuse? But I think that ties in with an earlier question of the 3 tips.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the past, present, and future. That's exactly right. Mm-hmm.
So I guess, we're at about an hour and 13 minutes. I know we both have some things to do. Plus, we finished the list. And I really want to thank you for being a rock star today. Because everyone else who doesn't know this, I screwed up the time, and you were kind enough to
no worries
to work things out with me. And your answers today were amazing. They're so clear for everyone, hopefully, who's listening to understand all the questions, and hopefully you'll come on the show again. And we'll do
I'd love that.
a whole round of questions. The people
that would be awesome.
And for the people who had the legal questions, I have a lawyer coming on in a couple weeks.
Awesome.
And this person, I can't go actually into detail about what I have that person just kind of wants to be anonymous, even though that they're like a well-to-do lawyer.
Very nice.
But for everyone who's listening, once again, talkwithshireen.com, with Shireen.com, is talk with SHIRIN.com. You can get a hold of Shireen there for her services for therapy and coaching. You do online as well in person?
I do, yes. I do virtual coaching through internet, through like video or phone therapy. And I also do obviously in person if you're Los Angeles. And there's a lot of good resources on my page. So if you'd like to, search there for good books or other professionals that you can link up with, like Family Access, or Bill Eddy has a great list of books that have really amazing helpful tips. I have that link in my resources section, so feel free to go through that. Or if anyone has any questions or I could be of assistance, feel free to send me an email.
And what would your email address be, or do you want to just have people go to your website? It's
Shireen at talkwithshireen.com.
Okay. And as well, her Instagram is at lets_talk_divorce. And her Facebook is facebook.com/talkswithshireen. And also for everyone listening, I created a subreddit page today, which is, r/narcissist apocalypse on Reddit. So I will post, once the show is up, I will post this show so people can discuss the show and talk about certain things there. I'll also leave up all of Shireen's information on that site and ways to talk to her so we can discuss everything that was discussed on the show today.
Thank you so much.
No, honestly, thank you. This has been a great show. And for everyone listening, one more time, thank you, Shireen, from the bottom of my heart for being a part of the show today.
My pleasure. I look forward to doing it again with you soon.
Perfect. And everyone else, have a good night. And that was the Q&A with Shireen, and I thought it was amazing, really. Everything was really clear and concise. All the information she was giving, and I really want to thank everyone for sending in their questions, and I want to thank Shireen once again. And if I may do so, because Shireen is such a rock star, if you want to get a hold of Shireen, the best way to do so is through her website, which is talkwithshireen, SHIRIN.com. And as you can tell, it was, or she is, she knows her stuff. And hopefully people also through the show, if they need to get a hold of someone, if you're not even in Los Angeles, to get a hold of her through her coaching. And hopefully she helps you with your healing process in the future. And hopefully she comes back on the show once again. And as I said at the beginning, come to our Reddit page. We are at, if you go to Reddit, it's some people might find it difficult to understand what Reddit is, but you go there, eventually you'll kind of get used to it. Our subreddit is called A Narcissist Apocalypse, and it's with a capital N and a capital A. You'll find us on there. This episode, I will put up tonight or right in the morning when I wake up, a little kind of subreddit for it. For this specific episode, I'll put all of the books that Shireen mentioned in the show on there for you so people can look at them. And if they want to go get them on Amazon or wherever they get their books, if they still go to a bricks and mortar like Barnes and Noble, if you're in the United States, or if you're in Portland, Powell Books, if you're in Canada, Indigo, that's Indigo Chapters. So that is that. Again, tell your friends. If you have someone who is struggling, tell them to come listen to the show. Just to help them feel less alone in the world, and give us some 5-star ratings, give us some nice reviews, and that is pretty much it. This is coming out on a Friday. On the Monday, a really interesting show is going to happen. It's an experimental show that I did with someone where it's mostly regular at the beginning, regular kind of story. And then we break off into this little art therapy aspect of the show. And it really became a very interesting show. And maybe someone wants to do a second one with me in the future if you guys like that type of episode. Because the conversation while we were actually drawing on the podcast, yeah, we did that. It was really... I didn't know if it was going to work. Still don't know if it's going to work because I haven't really edited it yet. I thought it was really... We got deeper, and it was really an interesting show. But I will stop talking about that, and I'll just let you guys go for today. And hopefully you guys have a good day. This has been the How to Survive the Narcissist Apocalypse podcast. Thanks for listening.
This is an emergency broadcast transmission. This is not a test. This is an emergency broadcast transmission. This is not a test. Please remain calm.